Welcome to Inviting Oneness, a podcast where we explore true personal stories from friends and members of EquaSion. Stories where the illusion of separateness gave way to the deeper truth of our shared humanity. Oneness isn't an idea, it's an experience. And today, we continue listening for it, one story at a time.
Our guest today is Michael Hawkins. Mike is a mediator and arbitrator at Dinsmore Shohl LLP and is the president of the board at EquaSion. Here's Mike.
So a life experience, I guess, dealing with the aspect of oneness, and for myself, I would say oneness is, one with humanity. I ended up some years ago, I was on the national board of the American Red Cross and was vice chair of international services. And we did a mission trip to Ghana. And as part of that, obviously had to fly to Ghana. So I flew from Cincinnati into JFK, and then from JFK was flying to Ghana. And I ended up flying on Ghana Airlines. And, I'd done a lot of human rights work and work with people of different races and backgrounds. But, I was a white male, and growing up, there was a lot of issue with, black people having to interface or assimilate with white people. So, I go to the gate and end up boarding on this Air Ghana flight. And I mean, if there were two other white people on the plane, maybe, but the rest of the people were African, flying back to Ghana for whatever reason or flying in that way. So I really had this sense and revelation like, okay, now I understand how it feels like maybe to be different in a situation. But, having always viewed that, I respect everybody and treat everybody individually and respect them as human beings, I had a much deeper oneness connection, if you will, with the world or with humanity by sharing that long flight from New York to Ghana, being one of the few white people on the plane, and had some sense of, wow, now I know how it might feel to be the minority in that kind of situation. And then certainly then being in Ghana and going to little small villages, things of that nature, and encountering people, but particularly children who'd never even seen a white person before and wanted to touch you and touch your hand and feel that kind of like, okay, here's somebody who's very different, very unique, but yet I was one with humanity. So that's kind of my oneness experience, I guess. Have had certainly plenty others relative to working in the faith community and the world religions.
I like how mundane the idea of jumping on a plane is and experiencing oneness as an expression of, I mean, honestly, of difference, right? You are being seen as a different kind of person than you're used to, and that gives you a visceral experience of oneness. Were there any specific details about the flight that you remember?
Not so much the flight, but just the very visceral experience of, wow, you might be the only white guy on this plane. I think there were a couple other white people, but 200 and some odd plus people on a big jumbo jet. And then just the fact that so many of the people were dressed in their Ghanaian garb and women with their head scarves and pieces and all that. Yeah, it was a unique experience.
I know you've given so much of your life to serving others, to being a force for good in the world. Have you been able to identify why you're so motivated to give so much of yourself to this community and to the rest of the world?
I trace a good bit of it back. I mean, my parents obviously were people who were involved, dad and boys club, girls club kind of stuff. And, my mother scouting and all those kinds of things, connecting people. And then being born in Detroit, but growing up for the most part, middle school, high school in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Kind of one of the things that was unique was having a black English teacher in this Catholic school. W.W. Lines was his name, and, had us read Black Like Me and stuff like that. Being validated by people in minority when you reach out to them and treat them like a friend and respect them, just that reinforcement and validation for being that kind of person, which was important. And then, always having validated from other people in the community, like hey, your dad's the best boss I've ever had, and just how he treated people and interfaced with people. And again, seeing the validation and importance of that.
One of the themes that's been coming up a lot in recent episodes is the importance of cross-cultural experience, of travel.
Yes.
When you're thinking about your own kids, your own grandkids, like, do you have any invitation for them or for the listeners and the ways in which travel and cross-cultural encounter expands our sense of self and gives us experience of oneness?
Well, it certainly has for me. I mean, as of to date, I think I've been to 54 different countries. I've been to, places I would never travel to, like Pakistan, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Jordan, Israel, West Bank, with Red Cross and Refugees International, being in refugee camps and seeing people having to survive in the most difficult and challenging situations. So that has certainly been a part of it. And then with one of daughters, and part of it was just circumstance, I took Megan, who now lives in D.C., but when she was in high school, Judge Nathaniel Jones planned a trip after apartheid ended in South Africa to go to South Africa. And we were going to go to Soweto and Johannesburg and Pretoria and Cape Town, a township in Cape Town called Atlantis. And her going with me, I think she was 16 years old at the time, and just that impact on her, and also then how she ended up getting a master's in international services and then volunteered in Tanzania as at an orphanage, and then went to Santiago, Chile, and volunteered at some inner city like YWCA in Santiago for inner city girls, and got a master's in international services and worked for the International Campaign for Tibet. So, just that impact of sharing with your children those kinds of experiences. And then I've certainly had them go to Refugee International board meetings and Red Cross activities and events, and just giving them that exposure, not pushing them in any particular way, but I think having the opportunity to see some of those things and have it validated is important for your family and your children.
So you started off by saying that your conception of oneness has to do with the connection to other people, with a wider sense of humanity. I also know that EquaSion is operating with folks from different kind of faith backgrounds and faith foundations. How would you talk about your own faith identity and how it connects with how you understand the idea of oneness?
I would say over time, and particularly being exposed to different cultures, different religions. I mean, particularly you go to places, Jordan and West Bank and Pakistan, you're dealing with very overwhelming Muslim cultures and Buddhist cultures and Cambodia and those kinds of things. And also with all these other world religions, I would say sometimes people say, oh, well, what's your faith? Well, I was raised Catholic, but I'm kind of a universalist in terms of, okay, I've been exposed to all this. They all have a lot of good things. I'm kind of middle path, Buddhist kind of mentality in terms of, a way of life as opposed to some certain doctrine that you have to follow or, have to be linked to, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's actually a pretty common kind of sentiment for folks who are in this kind of work. They have a very kind of open and expansive sense of spirituality and of the universe. For folks who are listening to you, what is the invitation that you're hoping they will take away from your story and from your own life?
I'd say just the value of life experiences that will help you build your cultural competence, maybe religious competence, so that you end up being somebody like, I wouldn't dictate to anybody like, oh, you should do this, or here's the best religion, or why don't you convert to Catholicism or something like that. Because by having all those other experiences, both with different cultures, different people, different religions, you learn to respect them all. And part of that oneness ties with nature. There's that whole aspect of interconnectedness. I mean, we're all interconnected and all support each other in different ways. And I heard one example using just, okay, well, you eat a blueberry. Well, where do you think that came from? Well, somebody had to plant it, somebody had to pick it, somebody had to pack it, somebody had to ship it. So we're all interconnected in that way.
For a lot of folks, the idea of traveling cross-culturally, of even encountering someone of a different race or religion, that prospect is fraught with fear and risk and the perception of danger. For the people who are listening to you and maybe who would like to take a step out of their own comfort zone, of their own sense of solitary individuality, but feel a little bit afraid to do so, what would you say to them?
I would say I'm sure all of us and everybody knows somebody who's different than them culturally or religiously. So a very easy aspect of that is, certainly participate in the Festival of Faith or, some of the activities that EquaSion has. But, there are umpteen chambers of commerce, Chinese, American, Japanese, Uzbekistan, all these different chambers of commerce in the community that you could go to. Somebody who's a friend, relative, who's different, just saying, hey, I'd like to get more exposed to, your faith or your religion or your culture. Would you take me, or can I go with you to an event or an activity or participate? Or is there something good to read or something you would share with me? All of those are different circumstances I've certainly had, which have had a positive impact for me. And the more I've done it, the more comfortable I am with going into situations that I've not been exposed to before.
Thanks for joining us on Inviting Oneness, where we share real stories of connection that dissolve the illusion of separation and reveal our common humanity. To learn more about the festival, our work at EquaSion, or to share your own story of oneness, visit us at EquaSion.org. Until next time, may we keep inviting oneness within ourselves and with one another.